I repeat, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin with our event, requesting everyone to kindly settle down. Also requesting our wonderful guests to kindly put your mobile phones on silent mode. Thank you. Alright, salam, namaste, vanakkam, and a very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Samina, your host for today, and it is my absolute pleasure and honor to welcome you all on behalf of Flipkart. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure all of you all will agree when I say that over the past week, the internet has gone into a complete frenzy over what's big on Flipkart. I mean, there are so many questions out there, right? What's big on Flipkart? What could possibly be so big that it could make King Kong look small? And what could possibly be so big that Flipkart would need a brand new, bigger cart, right? So it's been a whole week of questions and only questions. It's been absolutely exhausting, exciting, and I think curiosity levels are sky high. So don't worry, today is the day we'll have all our questions answered, and bringing us all our answers, we have with us Mr. Ajay Veer Yadav, Vice President, Mobile and Large Appliances, Flipkart. A big round of applause for him. He joins me on stage.
Thank you. Thanks. A lot of familiar faces. Down still. So let's say before the afternoon is over, sorry, am I loud enough? Actually, this is a question I ask in every meeting. Then I say, the way I speak, actually the mic is not needed. But thank you for coming. It's a pleasure meeting you guys, ladies, gentlemen. Quite some time since I actually met you. One promise that I give you before the afternoon is over today, you'll actually be wondering how many announcements and how many headlines will you be putting in the newspapers tomorrow. But thanks again. Just gonna take maybe around 5 minutes to talk about some bit about Flipkart, some bit about what will come over the next 6 months. Flipkart, the journey, I think you guys are familiar with Flipkart. We started about 10 years back. Mobile phones, everyone, whenever I talk to you guys, you always say, if I was to generally ask a question, the number one leader in the mobile phone industry, the answer would be Flipkart. I'm sure even, you may have a few issues about what the number would be, but nobody in the industry, ever doubts that when it comes to mobile phone retailing, the number one retailer out there in the market is Flipkart. What has led us to this place? We were the first ones to actually introduce affordable smartphones. If you just go back about 6 or 7 years back, a particular phone with a particular feature set would be available for a price point of, let's say, 100. Once Flipkart started making inroads into the mobile phone market, the whole price dropped. So when we say we made smartphones affordable in India, fundamentally we're saying for the same kind of features, for the same kind of power, processor, everything, once Flipkart entered into the arena, the prices started dropping, and that's how we made mobile phones affordable. That is what has led to our growth in the market. The second piece, I'm sure most of you actually have a Flipkart app on your phone. When you go into the mobile section, I actually challenge you, every 500 rupees you'll find a perfect fit for your budget. So the whole selection game that happens in e-commerce, again, Flipkart pioneered it for mobile phones. We start at about 3,000 rupees, 3,500, 4,000, 4,500, 5,000, and going all the way up to 50,000 rupees. You will have a phone that you can select from. The third, of course, is, again, if you go back 7-8 years ago, the brands that are, let's say, the powerhouses today in the Indian mobile industry, many of them were not even present in the Indian market. And Flipkart had the privilege of actually working with these brands and helping them build in India. Almost every single brand of scale that has been built in India, in online, has been built off Flipkart. And we're extremely proud of our achievement. We're extremely privileged that those brands gave us that opportunity. Just to put the number in context, 1 in every 4 phones sold last year, smartphones, happened on Flipkart. in the Indian retail history, there has never been a retailer of this scale in almost any industry. There have been big brands, but never a retailer. If India sold 100 phones last year, 25 phones approximately, and the reason we say approximately is, then we'll get into debate. Was it 25, was it 24, was it 26? But approximately 25% of all smartphones sold in the country last year were sold on Flipkart. The first time a retailer has ever done this. Just a brief snapshot on, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with the mobile industry. The industry grew by, somebody will say 10%, somebody will say 14%, but nobody in the room will say the industry grew by anything more than 15%. Okay, we've all been in the smartphone industry, we've been watching the trends. Flipkart, year on year, last year, grew by over 60%. That's where we are as a mobile retailer. What's the journey from here on? And actually, that's the interesting point that I want to talk about. That's probably one of the reasons why we invited you here. India's biggest mobile retailer, 25% share of the smartphone market. Where do we go from here? This is something that we've taken up as a challenge. See, a lot of times, there are enough newspaper reports that talk of digital India. How digital India will make things better, how people will transfer money, how they will talk with each other, how the whole infra costs will come down. Instead of people traveling, they would actually be doing everything online. What is our role in this one? When we look internally, we are also a corporate citizen of this country. We are saying, can we actually take on the challenge and say, from this 320 million, that's the total installed smartphone base in this country, and I'm being liberal. I'm including all the phones which are more than 3 years, 4 years old. Can we add another 100 million smartphone users to that base? That's when the whole digital India story starts happening. But with the feature phone, there's only so much you can do. You can talk, yes, it's a great thing, great use case from a battery point of view. But it's when the smartphone goes into every Indian's hand, that's when the digital India takes off. So internally we call it, and this is the first time we're actually announcing it to press, 40 by 20. Flipkart aims to be 40% of the smartphone market by 2020. Just to put some numbers on the table, that is equivalent to adding another 100 million customers to the smartphone industry. How will we do it? Some parts I'll be able to talk about right now. Some parts we will see over the next 3 or 4 months. We'll be meeting very often, this much I promise you. Local innovations, that's always been the core of Flipkart. When I say local innovation, the first part was how do we get brands that can actually give us the price point. We got those brands into the country, we got the price points down, but that was not the end of it. Every single city in this country, I can almost take it up as a challenge and say, you think of a city and Flipkart delivers there. Think of a city, any city that you can possibly think of right now sitting in the room, and the Flipkart will be able to deliver a smartphone within 2 days out there. You have a problem with the phone, Flipkart has tech visits to actually help solve those problems right in your home. It's not just speed, it's not just the coverage, it's not just the help that you need after you buy the phone. Flipkart has been working a lot harder, even on the affordability side. We met in the past and we've spoken about it. No-cost EMI. In a country of people where only 30 million credit cards are there, how do you provide EMI options to customers so that instead of buying a phone at 5,000 rupees, the person can actually buy a 10,000 rupee phone? A person who wants to buy a 10,000 rupee phone, how do you provide them an opportunity to buy a 25,000 phone? So no-cost EMI, again a Flipkart innovation in online. Buyback guarantee, where I actually tell you, when you buy a phone, I tell you exactly 9 months later, I will buy this phone back at this predefined value. Again, an innovation. So a lot of these innovations have actually taken us to where we are. That's 25% of the Indian market share. But this is a big step. 40% of the total smartphone industry, online, offline, by 2020 will be on Flipkart. Just to put this number in context, the total penetration of e-commerce in mobile phone is 30 to 35%. You can take your pick in between that. Flipkart is saying we will be bigger than the total online share of the mobile phone market in the next 3 years. That's 40%. That's one part of the many announcements that we'll be doing today. How do we go to 40%? We're announcing a tie-up, and we'll talk more about it with ASUS. We'll be talking more about ASUS as we go through the afternoon. But for people who are not familiar with ASUS, actually I'm sure you all are, a technology powerhouse, more than 3 decades of experience, PCs, high-end monitors, internal components, phones. Last year, if you followed ASUS, almost every single thing. So which company actually introduced 2 front and 2 back cameras to the Indian market, or to the world actually? ASUS. Which company actually brings the latest chipset to the market? ASUS. Which company introduced the first Tango phone? That was the Google project. Again, ASUS. So we'll talk a lot more about it. Flipkart, of course, you are aware of where we are, what our vision is, where do we want to be. 100 million customers to be added. Some part of the journey, that's 1, 2, 3 at the bottom, I've already spoken about. Let me just give you a brief sneak preview of what does that and more mean. See, our growth has been driven by fundamentally changing the ecosystem. When people said phones could not be this affordable, we worked with brands and made them affordable. When people said no-cost EMI is only eligible for credit cards, we changed and challenged it, and we made it accessible to people who do not have a credit card. When people said that buyback guarantee could never work, it never works in India, we actually challenged that whole thought process and introduced buyback guarantee. That and more is something that we will connect again at the end of this month. Let's just say we would fundamentally, every time you buy a product, you find a word limited. Limited warranty, limited coverage, limited this, limited that. We're saying, can we actually work closer with our brands? Can we actually pioneer the whole unlimited experience? But more on that later. We'll be in touch with each other to talk about 40 by 20. Right now, I'd like to invite Kalyan, CEO of Flipkart, to talk about the next 100 million customers. Because without those 100 million customers on board, this journey ain't happening. Kalyan, if you could come on board and talk about the next 100 million journey. Thank you very much.
Hi, good afternoon. I need the clicker. Actually, we should be proud as Indians to have 1.3 billion people in the country. We are among the biggest domestic markets in the world today. It's one of the biggest assets we have as a country. Our internet user base today is anywhere in the 350 to 400 million range. And in the next 3-4 years, we'll actually be at about 660 million consumer internet users. At that time, we'll actually be where China is today, very close to that. Sorry. India is an unorganized market in general, and there is a general belief that the retail industry in India is unorganized. While that is very true, more than 90% of the country is unorganized when it comes to retail. However, people don't fully realize that retail is not the only sector which is unorganized. Payments is unorganized, logistics is unorganized. Any ecosystem of the retail industry is unorganized. So the opportunity in India is not just retail. The opportunity in India is to organize all of these unorganized sectors. Each one of these are multiples of $100 billion businesses. So today, the retail industry in India is about 600 billion. We think it goes to about $1 trillion in the next few years. However, if you just look at the right side, the e-tail market in India is still very small. This is, of course, a bit dated. It's last year. Right now, we are probably tracking to about 15 billion. That's the size of the e-commerce market in India. Conservatively, we estimate that this market in the next 3-4 years is going to be 60 billion. There are actually a lot of reports which say it could be 60 to 100 billion. We're actually taking the lower end of those for this discussion. So, just wanted to give you a flavor of what drives the growth. So from 10 billion to 60 billion, let's say about 50 to 60 billion dollar of GMV gets added in e-commerce in the next few years. Of that, 40% of that is still going to be actually coming from mobiles and electronics. Actually, if you break this down further, from my recollection, 29% is just mobile. So It's still going to be among the most important categories in the country when it comes to dollar value in the next few years. The second biggest is actually fashion. Of course, fashion is actually getting bigger and bigger, and the bigger role fashion plays is that of customer acquisition. But when it comes to pure dollar value of commerce, it actually is going to be the first one here. So this is a very big role which actually e-commerce has played, and I would actually take pride in sharing that this is a big role which Flipkart has played. In 2012, there were 70 million smartphones which were sold in the country. In 2017, it's roughly about 80 million plus. But if you just look at e-commerce smartphones, in 2012, it was 10 million, and right now it's about 50% of everything which is getting sold. So going back to the previous slide where we shared the unorganized nature of the market, this is the power of e-commerce. This is actually organizing all of these businesses categories in India. This is a live example, by far the highest adoption example. And this is not going to stop. Actually, we shared 2012 to 2017, and as it goes to 2022, the adoption is actually just going to increase in multiples. This is 2017 and 2018. So share of customer mind share for smartphones with 3 GB RAM. So it was 55% was greater than 10K, and it's less than 10K is about 45%. In 2018, actually, this is another very big example of how value is being generated. As in, when we go into the future, we are actually able to get better quality phones for a way more cheaper value, a much better value proposition. So Ajay was talking about the concept of affordability in India, and this is the journey of affordability. Actually, even if you extend this to the last few years, this is a very, very compelling argument for the Indian consumer. Phones have actually become a lot more cheaper because the value chain of phones, value chain of a lot of these retail products have actually become way more efficient. A lot of that which gets actually transferred to the end consumer. So I would actually like to invite Jerry, the CEO of ASUS, our long-term partner. We've just announced a very big partnership with ASUS. I would like to invite Jerry to join me on the stage here.
Thank you very much, Karyang and Ajay and the team. ASUS is very proud to have Flipkart as our long-term partner in the Indian market. Flipkart is not only the #1 retailer of smartphones, but also a company who is focused on perfecting consumer experience and services. This common spirit is why our partnership is so strong. For many, I believe we will pave the way for many more great achievements for the Indian market. With the Flipkart partnership, we aim to